I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Sometimes life just feels impossible. Sometimes it feels like getting through this day, this week, or this month, or even the next hour is impossible, unbearable. There's no way that it's ever gonna end. I understand that feeling, and I don't have any quick tips or hacks or solutions to make life easier, but I can share what helps me a lot, and that's all related to seasons. But first, I just want to tell you this email. No, it was actually a comment I got on a blog post that I wrote called "How Do You Live Alone After Your Husband's Death?" And this is what she wrote. It's real quick. She said, "I'm 73 and completely lost. My anxiety is overwhelming. It's been 2 years since my husband died, and I feel worse, not better. I have no friends. I have 2 wonderful sons, but they are busy. No grandchildren, no brothers or sisters. Life just feels impossible." So I wanted to share 4 things that I always remind myself when I do get to that stage of feeling like life is impossible and I don't want to go on. And I also want to take us through a passage of scripture in Ecclesiastes, which is my absolute favorite book of the Bible. It's a book all about life is meaningless and hopeless, and there's just no point, and all we do is chase after stuff that we don't need. We try to make more money that we're never going to spend, and it's never enough money. And I love that book because it seems so desperate and lonely and filled with existential angst, and it talks about the impossibility of life. And that gives me hope and meaning for some reason. So my tips on coping when life feels impossible aren't about joining more groups or buying more stuff, for sure not buying more stuff, or trying to find ways to get involved or volunteering or making more friends. My tips are kind of the opposite of that. And they're more about going inward and being silent and still and sitting in a season of feeling like life is impossible. And when you sit in this feeling of life being impossible, you find that it passes much quicker than if you fight it and try to resist it. So the 4 reasons that I like to turn to Ecclesiastes when I feel like life is impossible is, number 1, it reminds me that we are not alone. That this writer of Ecclesiastes, anywhere from I think 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, he wrote this book. He felt that same feeling, and he was a rich king. He was a ruler. He had all the money that he ever wanted. He had all the wine, women, and song he ever wanted, all the power he ever wanted, and he had to sit and write about how life is meaningless and hopeless. So if that guy thousands and thousands of years ago felt it, of course we feel it today. It's natural, it's normal, it's just part of being human. The second thing that I remind myself is that a lot of people don't have the courage to admit that life feels impossible. A lot of people just keep scrolling through Facebook or buying stuff or watching or eating or gambling or sex or on and on. There's lots of ways to distract ourselves when we feel like, oh, life is impossible, but no, I'm going to go do this instead. Having the courage to sit with this feeling and to admit that you feel like life is impossible is huge and healing. The third thing that I remind myself is that there's a really good reason to feel like life is impossible. Because it is impossible. This world is so messed up. It's so beautiful in so many ways. It's so filled with beauty and joy and gloriousness, fun, laughter, food, yummy food, fireplaces, music, rain, sun, puppies and kittens, hugs and kisses, achievements, goals, passions, breath, heartbeats. There's so much good in this world, but yet, I don't have to tell you, there's a lot of pain, suffering, injustice, unfairness, anger. There's a lot of bad stuff too. So of course life and this world feels impossible, because it is. Because these things coexist for some crazy reason. I don't know why, but it is woven together. The fourth and most important thing that I remind myself, and this is directly related to Ecclesiastes, is that this is a season that will pass. Not just this pandemic or the grief that you feel or whatever you're going through. It's a season that if you just sit with it, it will pass. You're not always going to feel this way. Life does not feel impossible constantly 100% of the time. Not for anybody. I guarantee you that there will be moments of light, joy, sunshine, laughter. But first, we sit through this season of feeling like it's impossible. And here's how I do it. I remember that song called Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds, and it's about seasons changing and that there's a time for everything. And that brings me directly to Ecclesiastes. So what I want to do is share this passage of Ecclesiastes. I'm going to read it through once, just fairly quickly, a second time and tell you what stands out to me, and then a third time more slowly. And I encourage you to listen for a word or a phrase that sort of stands out to you. What makes you feel better, or what makes you feel worse, or what might God be trying to tell you, or what do you need to learn in this season of your life? So this is Ecclesiastes. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. It's Ecclesiastes 3, 1-8. So I'm going to read through it a second time, and this time I'm just going to stop at a phrase or two that stands out to me in this season of feeling like life is getting impossible or is impossible already. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. This is huge. There has to be room and space for every feeling, every activity, every thought, every belief, every experience. And if we avoid the more painful ones, then we avoid a big part of life. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. And both with the being born and the dying and planting and uprooting, a friend of mine died a couple days ago, and there's a time for death. And that doesn't make it easier or less surreal or less painful. It just makes it part of life. And sitting with this season of life and death means that it's just part of a rich and full and deep life. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh. And right now, when life feels impossible, I actually wish I could weep. I've been wishing I could cry since my friend Anya died, but I don't know why, but I don't have tears. I just have a sadness. A time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up. And this phrase used to stand out to me a lot, a time to search and a time to give up. Sometimes we look maybe for meaning or for hope or for love or for joy, and sometimes we just give up and we sit in a season of this feeling. A time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. It's Ecclesiastes 3, 1-8. So I'll read through this passage one last time. So just allow a word or a phrase or a thought or a feeling to come in and then allow it to go through you. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time for love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. It's Ecclesiastes 3, 1-8. Thank you for sharing Ecclesiastes with me. As I said, it's my favorite book of the Bible, and it really means a lot to me that you're here and that you're sharing it with me. I just encourage you to take good care of yourself in this season, especially when you feel like life is impossible, because taking care of yourself now is more important than ever. Take good care of yourself, for you are worth taking good care of. Mwah! I think I'm on fire. That's really hot. It's a time to burn. I didn't just say that.